Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Muhammad, the moderator of PhD Live Talk series. This series consists of friendly conversations that discusses some of the challenges facing PhD researchers and sharing their experiences and stories with everyone. This episode will focus on the write-up of the PhD from a non-native English speaker's perspective. Specifically, the episode will compare and contrast Latin and English writing styles, since understanding cultural and language differences can enable more effective communication in English. The episode's guest speaker is Fabio Salvador. He is a Brazilian researcher currently completing his PhD in Security and Crime Science at University College London. His research falls under the UCL-JDI Latin America and Caribbean unit. Fabio holds a bachelor's degree in architecture and urbanism at Pontifical Catholic University of Paraná in Brazil, and a master's degree in urban management at the same university. Welcome Fabio to the PhD Live Talk series. Could you please tell us what is your PhD about?
Well, my doctorate is about the influence of the urban environment on criminal behavior. Basically, my research thinks in what we call environmental criminology, which is an umbrella concept at trying to understand which components are necessary for a crime to occur in the urban environment. So we consider the presence of an offender, a motivated offender, a potential victim or target, and a place without guardianship. Most studies in the area of environmental criminology don't consider all elements of urban form and compare them with crime location. So what we have is one or another element, and we compare this element with the location of crime. My research attempts to fill this gap by considering the elements of a streetscape. So let's say that I'm gonna consider lighting posts, urban furniture, vegetation, the features of the frontage of the plot, and so on. So my idea is to test these elements and see to what extent they can influence the occurrence of crimes, and I'll try to establish the impact of each one of them on crime occurrence. Knowing that each of these elements may have a certain impact on criminal behavior will allow me to establish their cost-benefit ratio, and this cost-benefit ratio will dictate the investment made by the government agencies.
Coming from a Latin educational background, have there been any challenges writing your PhD thesis in English rather than Portuguese, your native language?
Well, I think it's been a challenge for me for two main reasons. The first one is that the language, it's a challenge in itself. There is a big difference between expressing myself in my mother tongue and expressing myself in English. So in my mother tongue, I don't need to think about the most accurate words or how to put phrases in the correct order or any other grammar articulation. So the thoughts I have or the ideas I have, they occur more fluently, and you can see this in my text and how fast I am when writing. But this doesn't happen in English because I need to be careful with the best words to use. So this fluidity, I would say, is compromised. So the second reason why I've been struggling to write my dissertation in English has also to do with the language itself, but I would say that's more, I think that would say it's more related with the cultural difference. It seems that English native speakers are more straightforward than Latin people, and you can realize that not only with the spoken language, but also in the written texts. So, for example, in Portuguese, I may need 2 or 3 words to express the same idea that can be done with 1 word in English. In other cases, such as large essays in Portuguese, for example, we try to be more fluid, and by fluid, we understand that we can't repeat words, but this is the total opposite in English. In English essays, we need to stick with repetition of some words so the reader can understand what we are talking about, and this is gonna help the cohesion as well. It took me a while to understand the difference between Portuguese and English essays, and I always catch myself making those type of mistakes, so I usually change or swap words, but I shouldn't be doing that.
Could you please describe some of the main differences between Latin and English writing styles in a PhD thesis?
The difference between the 2 languages starts with the structure of the thesis. Obviously, the structure also changes according to the area you're researching in. Basically, the shape of a thesis in Portuguese embraces the same elements in English, but the thing is that the approach to the problem is different in both languages. So, for example, in a thesis in Portuguese, the introduction is compounded by the introduction itself, followed by a contextualization, that is the background of the problem, and the presentation of the research problem, and after that we have the research question and justifications. We usually say in Portuguese that we first present or introduce the negative aspects of the problem, and then after formulating the question of research, we present the positive aspects. In English, this order is not the same. In the introduction chapter, we first have 1 or 2 paragraphs talking about the overview of the thesis, addressing the background, the problem itself, and how the thesis is organized. And only after this short introduction that we have the other paragraphs talking about the introduction itself. So it's a sort of introduction of the introduction. Another difference is that in Portuguese, we first present the problem and then we have the positive aspects. So we have, as I said before, negative aspects, the problem, and then we have the problem, the research question, and then we try to justify the study by presenting the positive aspects of it. We don't have this in English, so what we have is the problem, the background, the research question, the justifications, everything at the same time, and then after the research question, we have the objectives, the specific objectives, and after that, we're gonna have the structure of the thesis and following chapters. Another interesting thing about the thesis in English is that we have usually an introduction and a conclusion paragraph for each chapter or subchapter, but this doesn't happen in Portuguese because we consider it a bit repetitive and boring. I remember having a professor in Brazil, and he used to study in the US, and he was quite incisive about the need of an introduction and a conclusion on each chapter and subchapter of my master's dissertation. So we would follow this structure on his paperwork. But the interesting thing is that the other professors in the department didn't like this writing style because they thought it was too mechanical or repetitive for them. So they would ask us to change the style into a Portuguese or Brazilian way of writing. And only after I came to the UK, I realized how important this structure is. So when you have this introduction and conclusion on each chapter and subchapter, this structure is it kinds of tie the ideas together, and then you are prepared to what's going to be read and also you summarize in your mind what you have just read. Another interesting aspect of writing in English is that paragraphs always tend to start with sentences that are going to summarize them. Let's say that I'm going to write an essay about the pros and cons of working from home. The first sentence of each paragraph should be the pros and cons themselves, and the rest of the paragraph will add further explanation and examples. It seems a bit repetitive and mechanical to Latin people, but we usually tend to be more romantic in writing. So we are concerned with fluidity of ideas in the essay, and this writing must be pleasing to read, as if it was a dance of words. This can work very well if you are writing a poem or a song lyric, for example. But when it comes to efficacy of written communication, this rigid and repetitive structure of English works better, and it works better because it forces the author to structure his way of thinking, and as a consequence, it's going to help him to structure his research as well. And on top of that, this English style helps the reader to understand what is being read. I think that this is a very important feature when it comes to scientific information. Another aspect that differs from Portuguese to English is word repetition. So in Portuguese, we avoid repeating words as much as possible, and we often look for substitution by other words or expressions. The problem lies in the need for understanding by the reader. So in English, we got some keywords to help the author to familiarize the reader with the essay. So what we do is that we first introduce that word to familiarize the reader, and then we maintain the presence of that word to reinforce that the subject covered are still talking about the same topic. I would say that's a kind of signposting in essays. Finally, and only to reinforce the points made before, let's assume that you need to quickly read some articles and dissertations for your literature review. When the papers are structured in the English way of writing, it's going to be much easier for you to screen the essential information in the papers, and you can simply search in the first and last paragraphs. On top of it, you can also skip to the first sentence of each paragraph. I'm sure that you will not have any difficulty to find the information you need on English papers. On the other hand, in Portuguese, it's a struggle to find the best pieces of information, and most of the times, you're gonna read everything to understand the paper.
What's your take-home message for other researchers about writing styles in non-native language in general and Latin to English specifically?
I believe that the main message I take to my Latin colleagues and speakers of other language is that understanding cultural and language differences is essential for good communication in English. And besides that, learning how the English way of thinking as a whole can help even the research process itself, make it more straightforward and focused on results, without the risk of being prolix or lengthy, which is very common in Romantic language such as Latin. Finally, I believe that the ability to communicate well in English can open up many opportunities for the researcher. English is most used language not only in the scientific community, but also in business, trading, and other areas, and it is for sure a key point to create opportunities. I think it's not a matter of translating your paper into English, but it's a whole way of thinking in a straightforward and structured way that will facilitate your communication with other scientists, and that's gonna bring you better prospects.
Stay tuned for our upcoming episodes and we hope you find something useful in them.